Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for an MP Wired for HR and Go Global sponsored webinar, US versus Global Talent Acquisition, Key Differences and Best Practices. I'm Katie Kreider, Content Marketing Manager here at MPHR. At MPHR, we help our clients succeed by aligning their people strategy with their business goals. MPHR and Go Global have partnered to offer a comprehensive payroll and HR solutions for businesses with a global workforce. This partnership ensures that businesses can comply with complex labor laws and regulations in multiple countries, while also streamlining their HR processes. Just a few housekeeping issues before we get started here today. If you would like to submit a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We will be sending out the recording of today's presentation after the webinar along with the slides. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sharon and Harry to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Katie. Hello, everyone. My name is Sharon Hoyt. I am the Senior HR Partner at MP. I've been with MP for over a year. However, before coming to MP, I have worked in an HR consulting role in previous companies, working with clients on their handbooks, job descriptions, employee relations issues, compliance, and also provide trainings to our clients for their managers and their employees. I'm excited to be here today to talk about the US trends on this portion of our training. I'm going to turn it over to Harry right now.
Thank you, Sharon. Hi, everyone. I'm Harry Dillon. I'm the director at Go Global for our recruit and hire division. I've been in the kind of global recruitment and employment space for 5 years and have been supporting clients hire, I think, over into about 90 different countries. So I look forward to guiding you through and hopefully answering any questions. I wanted to kick things off with just giving an overview of Go Global for those of you that aren't aware of who we are and what we do. We're a leader in the global remote HR and expansion space. We help our clients recruit, hire, manage, and pay global talent around the world. We have an expert team of, I think it's actually much higher, it's 250 plus staff across 82 countries spread across 6 continents. Next slide. Thank you. Our primary service or solution that we offer is our employer of record solution. This is a service that we help our clients hire global talent around the world without them physically needing an entity. So we act as the local HR in the country where we have the entities, and the client that we work for supervises and directs, controls the workers, but they're treated like any other employee. So we provide the local support, the local HR advice in the countries that we cover. In actual fact, we actually support clients in around about 140 countries. We have a number of partners that we have vetted and trusted over the years that support us in regions that we're not directly set up in. Now, we have a number of auxiliary services that support clients with expansion. So some clients need help in actual identifying clients, so we're able to do that. So we have a global recruitment team that actually identifies senior to mid-level workers, both in permanent and contractor positions. We're able to help our clients also with key intel in regards to where to hire. If they're unclear on where certain talent may reside, we can provide them with detailed talent mapping pools. We can provide them with salary benchmarking. For example, in the US, a software engineer may be on 100, 150 USD a year. However, in other parts of the world, that salary is significantly lower. So we're able to guide clients through that, what their salaries look like, what the benefits are in different countries, because they differ, what the kind of additional benefits that they can provide. So, for example, some clients want to provide equity support. We're able to administer that as well. All of our clients are able to access our Blue Ocean platform, and this allows them to track where all of their employees around the world are, as well as having direct access to our account managers and our local experts in kind of 82 plus countries.
Before we get our presentation, I'd like to quickly go over our legal disclaimer. Today's content is purely for educational and informational purposes. So while we hope that you enjoy what you're learning today, we are, as a reminder, not attorneys. So any information that you learn today should not be construed as legal advice. Our agenda today will cover the following topics. We will talk about remote work trends, pay transparency, AI in hiring, international compliance, benefits and perks, and lastly, getting started with international hiring. So let's kick off with remote work trends. So according to Harvard Business Review, 60% of employees say the cost of going into the office outweighs the benefits. 67% feel going to the office requires more effort compared to the pre-pandemic times. And finally, 73% feel it is more expensive to go into the office. So as you can see, employees in general, do value the freedom of having more time to do their work and value the work-life balance more than ever. So that's where the struggle is for a lot of employers when it comes to recruiting and maintaining the employees' happiness and satisfaction in the workplace. Next slide, please. So therefore, employers will need to be creative in finding ways to maintain that equilibrium by creating different solutions and offer different benefits to attract and retain employees, such as the followings. Some employers will offer housing subsidies, and they will offer employees some relocation fees, for example, to help them move from their current living situation to a different living situation if the job requires that. And for those employees that may require some travel short term, some employers will purchase real estate so that they have temporary housing available to their employees. Another thing that employers often come across is the lack of childcare or elder care, because many employees today, especially those of us who are in the sandwich generation where we're caring for our own children, but also our aging parents, we may be the primary caregiver, or at least one of them. So it's important to find ways to help these employees be able to perform their work and basically go into the work location if necessary. So some employers are offering on-site or shared drop-in childcare services. This is especially beneficial for those parents who don't necessarily want to leave their children at home and prefer to keep them close by so that during breaks they can go and see their children and spend some time with them. And this could be a great way to transition them back into work. The other option is also the pre-vetted pet care. So many employees have pets at home that they're reluctant to leave behind for long periods of time. And it's hard to find trusted sources to take care of them while they're at work. So some companies are offering some pre-vetted pet care in order to recommend employees the best pet care that they can possibly consider in order to report to work or do their work comfortably. And lastly, on-call access to skilled care providers for elder care. Like children, elder care is a growing concern for many of us in this generation. So it is important that employees feel they're supported and that they don't need to worry about whether or not their elderly family members are going to be taken care of while at work. So having some on-call service to rely on is very beneficial for those employees that need it. There's also financial well-being. So some companies are offering financial planning by hiring financial planners to set up lunch and learn sessions or having these virtual Zoom calls to educate employees on how to start planning for their future, how to invest in on their retirement, and other financial concerns that they may have. Another growing concern is student loan repayment. During the pandemic, the government has provided some programs to relieve and to forgive certain loan repayments for students that are in debt. But now that the pandemic is over, these students are facing these ever-growing financial burdens. So 43 million Americans have loans totaling $1.7 trillion. That is a lot of money that needs to be repaid. And sometimes it's hard for employees to maintain that while making a salary and trying to plan for their future. So there is a US tax code that allows organizations to help make contributions to help alleviate that financial burden for them.
So I want to focus on the remote work trends that Sharon mentioned in the US. Those trends are very similar in Europe and other parts of the world, especially the amount of global remote opportunities since the pandemic. That there were some people that are saying, obviously, once people return back to the offices, those numbers would start to decrease. If anything, and according to the World Economic Forum's research, that is only increasing. We're seeing more and more opportunities, and by their research, by 2030, we're going to see a 25% increase in the number of global remote roles. Now, the biggest growth sectors, and this is what we're seeing as well, by far number one is tech and IT roles, then accountancy, finance, sales and marketing, and even some pharmaceutical life science positions. These are very remote friendly roles. They kind of lend themselves to being carried out anywhere. There's no longer a need for them to be positioned in a particular office or a particular region. These can be delivered pretty much remotely, as long as the infrastructure exists for it to be done so. So we're seeing in that research, those are both permanent positions and contractor positions. We're also seeing a trend that there's a number of countries that have by far the most remote opportunities. So US is by far number one, but even across Europe and countries like Spain, the Netherlands, Portugal, Sweden, we're seeing a large number of remote jobs, both permanent and contractor, and even further afield in places like Australia, Mexico, and Malaysia. Since the pandemic, we've then seen the emergence of special visas such as the digital nomad visas. So countries like Brazil, Mexico, Spain, Portugal, and Malaysia, they're encouraging workers to come to the countries not just for work purposes, but also stay, travel, and really get that work-life balance. And obviously, those countries that I mentioned, they're not the worst countries to go to travel and work in either. So you've got some countries that are encouraging remote workers in. You've got other countries that are offering tax relief and tax breaks. Greece, for example, offers 50% tax relief to remote employees. Italy is supporting employers by providing subsidies and reimbursements for remote equipment for their remote staff. Singapore provides various tax incentives to employers to hire remote staff. So a lot of this is been driven also by employees, as Sharon's figures showed. It's very similar in Europe. Employees want that flexibility. They no longer see the need for certain roles of going into an office Monday 9 to 5, losing that time in a commute. They want that flexibility. And what we've seen through the stats is those employers that offer the employees the flexibility from where they work, whether it be fully remote, whether it be hybrid, actually have much higher worker satisfaction. That then leads to much higher staff retention and lower costs incurred through retraining and hiring new staff, which can only be a positive. There is added benefits to employers as well. When it actually comes to sourcing talent, you're no longer, as an employer, limited to candidates that live kind of 50, 60 miles from a particular office. Technology has advanced. There's massive improvement around the world in IT infrastructure. This all enables workers and employers to connect in a much more different way. We're also seeing certain talent pools that weren't being utilized before, powered through remote work. So those individuals that aren't necessarily suited to 9 to 5 or able to get to offices in major cities, especially that D&I group. We're really seeing them giving an opportunity with them being able to deliver on these roles, and it's a whole new talent pool that has been opened up to employers. Next slide, please. Thank you. However, there is legal and compliance and kind of areas to consider when hiring outside in different countries. There's different employment laws, there's different tax burdens that trigger. And also in certain countries, you have severance and termination procedures to follow. So for example, if a US company wants to hire someone in, let's say, France, for example, even though the headquartered company is based in the US, the individual is based in France. The individual and the company would have to follow the rules and regulations from an employment perspective for that worker by France's laws. Also, even though in the US there's at-will termination, by terminating a worker in France, you have to follow the rules and regulations that exist in France, which are a lot more complex. The other things to consider when taking on board and employing a kind of remote global workforce is there are added benefits through exposure to different cultures, different languages, different ideas. However, it's not always going to be possible, for example, to get everyone in one call on one Zoom call because of the different time zones that you have to take into consideration. Now, I mentioned that technology has advanced. However, where you have more and more people accessing servers for companies, it puts more of a strain and a concern on cybersecurity and data security. So our recommendation is always organizations need to look at a robust governance and risk compliance framework to ensure that their data and their information is secure. Where you have more and more people accessing networks through kind of coffee shops, or if their home Wi-Fi isn't secure, it's opening up employers to that risk. So things to consider. Also, one of the other important things that we talk to our clients about is ensuring that remote staff feel part of a company and not like second-class workers. You have workers in an office and you have your remote workers based somewhere else. You want everyone to feel as part of one team and pulling in one direction. So employers need to look at how they can kind of encourage that and foster that that behavior. At the same time, it's a lot of compliance when operating in different regions as well. We've seen the rise in remote work, and we're now starting to see, especially in the EU, a number of the EU states have started to introduce what they call the telework regulations, which is to help and support remote workers that have kind of fairer treatment, better working conditions from home compared to, let's say, if they were in an office. So this, and we'll go into more detail on this, but things such as employers not being able to contact workers outside of certain working hours. It's all designed to improve the health and the well-being of their workers. Now, one of the other things that you may have seen on one of the first slides is last year, the Go Global team, we tracked 560 different regulated changes. So that just shows by having a trusted partner like us, we can keep you in kind of out of hot water in regards to obviously legislation and regulation changes by monitoring and working with a company like us that's kind of at the forefront.
Now we're going to dive right into the topic of pay transparency. Over recent years, questions of pay equity has been a hot topic emerging in the United States workplace. Some states have adopted their own pay equity laws in response to boost transparency about compensation. As a result of this, many states have issued their own pay disclosure laws to promote the now trending pay transparency laws. So on the screen, you see a number of states, including their local cities, that have state-specific or local city ordinances when it comes to disclosing pay information. And these states, as you can see here, some of them have been having this law in effect for a while, but you will also see some new ones popping up coming up in January 2025, as well as some coming up in middle of next year in July of 2025. Be mindful that on this list here, Ohio is the only state that does not have a statewide initiative to promote pay transparency, but the local cities such as Cincinnati and Toledo will require that on their job postings, on employees' job descriptions, and being able to have that available and ready for review. Next slide, please. According to the industry research, 99% of creative, marketing, and tech professionals are more likely to apply to companies that practice pay transparency. 82% of US workers are more likely to consider applying to a job if the pay range is listed. Ultimately, pay transparency ensures that employees are paid based on their skills, experience, and performance rather than on arbitrary factors like gender or race. Even if not required by law, employers may want to consider disclosing pay ranges in their job postings to encourage qualified job seekers to apply. The wider the applicant pool, the more likely employers will find the right candidates for their organizations.
Now, in Europe, April last year, the EU introduced something called the EU Pay Transparency Directive, which is very similar to what Sharon has mentioned, which aims to close the pay gap specifically around gender pay. It was introduced to foster much more trust in between employees and their employers. So the idea behind this is employers must in Europe disclose starting salaries and pay ranges for jobs, and they can't ask about previous pay. So for example, if you're coming into, let's say, a sales role and there's an existing sales team, if you're coming from a previous employer that's on 50,000 euros and the rest of the team is on 70,000, as long as there isn't a 5% pay gap, they can't put you on a lower salary. It's the idea that there isn't a big pay gap, especially between the genders. Now, workers are also able to request average pay levels between genders, even if there's not a like-for-like role. So if there's a similar role within the organization, within a different team, they are able to request that information. This is really affecting those companies that have currently employees over 250 across Europe. So this affects companies that also have multiple workers in different European countries. So smaller companies have different rules, but the idea is this all is future-proofing the gender pay, and those companies that actually have a pay gap between the genders of more than 5% have to take corrective action, and there has to be a justified reason why that may exist. These measures are to promote the transparency and equal pay and increase trust within the workspace. So one of the areas that I look after personally myself is the hiring process with a lot of our clients. And one of the most recent advancements is within AI. AI has been seen as a really kind of helpful tool, especially for certain tasks that are slightly repetitive. We ourselves use a number of tools that help us kind of screen CVs and applicants in the kind of initial phase, and it helps us assess those candidates in a much more quicker way. The AI tools that are out there at the moment, they're able to kind of handle inquiries in real time in kind of 24/7. They're able to kind of handle CVs and applications in multiple languages as well, which is kind of massively revolutionary and time saving and cost saving for us, and it enables us to help our clients make placements a lot earlier. However, a study that was done by the World Economic Forum found that only 62% of business leaders are openly happy about adopting this, and that number drops even lower to 52% with employees. And as much as AI has its positives in productivity and automating routine tasks, it's also in the wider work environment helping with kind of detecting cybersecurity threats in real time. There is a number of negative aspects to this as well. One of the biggest being job displacement. And this is where employees fear that AI will replace certain roles and responsibilities and therefore make their roles redundant. Go to the next slide. Now, there's the pros that I've mentioned. There is also one alarming negative kind of area with the AI, and that's around the bias in the algorithm. One of the areas that the research found was if the humans that are training the algorithm have a more serious race or gender stereotype, that unconscious bias is carried forward in the AI. So when it comes to screening applicants and it comes to screening CVs, they will be unfairly discounted from the process because of that. So organizations need to address this and implement ethical guidelines, transparent policies, and have a robust data privacy measure to ensure that what is going into the AI and how it's being trained kind of removes any of these stereotypes and kind of unconscious biases. Now, we've talked a little bit about some of the compliance when obviously hiring remote workers in other countries. But one of the biggest areas that we work with our clients on is guiding them through the different nuances when it comes to countries within a particular region, and even the other side of employment where terminations and severances exist. It's really important that in advance you have a partner that you can trust, that has been vetted, that's able to kind of handhold you through these processes. There's labor laws that have also come into effect that are ever changing, and being on top of these is really important. So I mentioned earlier, Portugal and France have introduced strict penalties for companies that contact employees outside of normal working hours, days off, and weekends. You've got countries like Poland and Ireland that have introduced new regulations that require employees to meet the cost of remote work, whether that be equipment, whether that be providing a safe and appropriate environment for them to work. Also, there's key differences when it comes to kind of data protection, and having a partner that can kind of handhold you and make you feel secure in that is really important. In the EU, for example, GDPR rules differ from other parts of the world. It is the requirement of the employer and companies to get the permission from the individuals to share that data, and the individual has the right to delete and control how their data is used as well. All of this, working with partners and having the right partners, will help you future plan and where you decide to expand into the future. And obviously different countries have different rules and regulations, so being aware of that is ultimately the most important thing in ensuring those future decisions.
When it comes to benefit offering trends, historically, benefits has always been a huge driver in attracting and retaining employees, and still it hasn't changed and it's becoming more and more prevalent. As new employment laws are rolled out, employers are still struggling to remain competitive in their benefit offerings, despite being required to offer certain benefits or certain leaves from a local or federal standpoint. Here are some new benefit trends that are popping into the US workforce. When it comes to holidays, most employers do offer the basic 6 federal holidays. That includes New Year's, Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And then there are others employers that do sprinkle in occasional other holidays that are applicable to them depending on their workforce and their local laws. Nowadays, we're finding more employers are trying to be more diverse and inclusive. So they are recognizing certain holidays that are traditionally not holidays that are being offered in the workplace for recognizing time off. So these include religious or cultural holidays. So for example, in my culture, I'm Chinese American. I celebrate certain holidays throughout the year that most companies don't, namely Lunar New Year, right? So instead of just offering Lunar New Year off to anyone who is Asian, our company at MP and other companies would offer personal days or a cultural day in order to acknowledge the fact that employees would like to take some time off on a personal level to celebrate these special moments with their families. We also have statutory leaves that have been being introduced to different states. And some of these include mandatory sick leave, whether they're paid or unpaid, earned time off to be used for many other purposes, including vacation or personal time. There's also paid family medical leaves and other leaves on a state and federal local level. These leaves are great and they're a great benefit for employees because it ensures that they are taking the time off to not only take care of themselves, but be able to also take time off to care for their loved ones, such as dependents or elderlies that require their attention. But unfortunately, it's still a huge struggle for employers to retain employees despite having to offer these types of required leaves. And then so what employers would do is sometimes they will offer a little extra time beyond what's expected of them by law. So for example, in Massachusetts, there is the required mandatory Massachusetts earned sick time. So the standard is at around 40 hours per year. But some employers decide that they want to be a little more generous and would offer additional time off. So instead of 40 hours, they may bump it up to 60 hours or 80 hours at their own discretion. When it comes to medical care, there's a balance between government involvement and private sector solutions. Different countries approach healthcare reform in various ways based on their unique needs and systems. The United States often debates focus on the balance between government involvement and the private sector and the impact of reforms on different segments of the population. Healthcare reform has been a hot topic since Obamacare has been introduced in our workforce in the United States. It's a broad and complex topic involving changes to the healthcare system to improve access, quality, and cost efficiency. In the US, it's often discussed in terms of expanding coverage, controlling cost, and improving the quality of care. So the first thing that employers need to think about is providing access to care. These are efforts to ensure that more people have insurance coverage, either through public programs like Medicare and Medicaid or through private insurance options. In some states would offer their own state sponsored health plans that if employees for some reason do not have access to their employer's group insurance or they're just not eligible, then they have options to go through their state or local healthcare programs that are affordable and provide some extensive coverage. And then there's cost control. There's the strategy to reduce the overall cost of healthcare, including negotiating drug prices, reducing administrative costs, and improving care efficiency. So things such as flexible spending accounts or health reimbursement accounts, those are Section 125 pre-tax deductions that can help offset some of these rising costs of healthcare. Then there's the quality of care, initiatives to enhance the quality of healthcare services, including patient safety measures, better coordination of care, and evidence-based practices. So many healthcare carriers offer different options for different tiers of coverage. So depending on the employer's employee base, they may want to evaluate what their workforce demographics look like, if they are understanding of their employee needs so that they can build and customize health plans that would be able to provide the employees the best quality of care possible. With insurance market regulations, it changes how the insurance markets are regulated, such as requiring coverage for pre-existing conditions or implementing subsidies to make insurance more affordable. It's a rising cost. Every year, employers have to deal with open enrollment and figure out how to budget in order to continue offering affordable coverage for their employees. And the rising cost could be anywhere from just 1 or 2%, depending on the plan, to up to 15 to 20% in some cases. And sometimes it all depends on what the Department of Insurance sees in their data and how it's driving the rising cost. And then there's public health. Policies aimed at improving public health outcomes, including preventive care, mental health services, and addressing social determinants of healthcare. So mental health is another topic that's been on the rise since COVID, and many insurance policies now offer some mental health care to the participants so that they have access to that. Otherwise, it might not be something that most people would address, and this could hopefully encourage participation and have people be more open to letting others help them with their mental health struggles. Another trend that we're seeing in the United States is the push for 4-day work week. When it comes to work-life balance, the United States does have the least amount of holiday and time off compared to our international counterparts. So many employers are trying to find ways to keep that balance and maintain the work interest of many employees. So having the ability to offer some flexibility in terms of the work scheduling is a benefit for most employers, especially for employees that have other things going on in their lives outside of work. According to a 2023 survey conducted by Gartner, 63% of candidates rated a 4-day work week for the same pay as a top new and innovative benefit that would attract them to jobs. So if employers are able to offer a 4-day work week, this could lead to employee engagement. It would improve performance and employees' well-being. So things also such as business outcomes, including driving competitive advantage to attract job candidates and retain employees and eliminate the inefficiencies. And this also pushes organizations to rethink the cadence of work. So if they're going to implement this 4-day work week, there's going to be a little bit more things to consider and to make sure that these are addressed accordingly. So employers would need to be more explicit about scheduling focus time, collaboration efforts, brainstorming, and feedback sessions, only because the work week is now truncated. So there's less days in a week that the employees are actually working. So all the hours that are going to be squeezed into a 4-day work week would count more because of that. And allows an organizations to benefit from shared expectations for when different types of tasks might be done. So this will be an opportunity to make sure that if employees are going to adopt to this 4-day work week, they are getting the work done on a timely and efficient basis. And the result would be to reduce the burden on managers and employees to set these expectations. So in other words, employers do need to be very transparent about the job expectations moving forward if the employees are going to start working these 4-day work week.
So again, a lot of the trends that Sharon has talked about there are trends that we see in other parts of the world. A 4-day week is something that is currently being tried and trialed in the UK and in other European countries as well. We're also seeing that employees are looking at potential employers and what other benefits that they are able to offer, specifically after coming out of the pandemic in regards to kind of mental health support and personal development. Also, if you're a company or an employer that's looking at hiring in other countries and you're looking at remote staff, one of the considerations to think about is the benefits that you're looking at offering workers in your home country may be statutory and mandatory in some of the countries that you're looking at hiring in. So, for example, in most of Europe, private healthcare is healthcare is funded by majority of the states. There is a private option, but it's as good as you can get in regards to a free service that is contributed by employer and employee. There's other regional and country specific benefits as well that you need to be considered. So I'll take Spain and Portugal, for example. There are additional bonus payments that are mandatory and statutory. There's a Christmas payment and an additional 14th payment. So being aware of these benefits and also what impact that would have on existing workers in a different country that don't get that benefit is definitely something to take into consideration. But one of the biggest trends that we're seeing is how employers are able to integrate remote staff and what are the benefits that allow them to feel as part of the wider team as opposed to feeling like remote employees. This is something that we hear quite often, that when we're speaking to candidates for remote positions, is how employers will address this. So these are considerations that need to be looked at, but there is a number of benefits that we can support clients with, and especially in other parts of the world that are actually mandatory compared to some of the benefits that are given as a paid benefit in the US. So I just wanted to touch upon if you do have plans to look at hiring internationally and outside of your borders, this is something that we're quite keen to support clients on. We've done this with a number of clients for many years. The first initial step would be, what is it you're looking at recruiting, and the why. Where can we look for that talent for? Is there a particular region? Is there a particular reason you're expanding to a particular country? So the two most common reasons that we see are, let's say, for example, a US company is looking at expanding into Germany. However, they aren't quite comfortable already at this stage to establish an entity straight away. They want to test the market out. We're able to support them through our employer record solution with a bridge solution. It enables them to test their market out, and now someone to build the brand in the region. If successful, 1-2 years down the line, we can work with our partners in establishing an entity and then transitioning those employed workers over. Alternatively, if the test launch doesn't work, then it's a simple process for us to kind of terminate that worker and move them on. Obviously, the solutions that we provide allow much quicker access into markets. It gives companies and employers a bit more of a competitive advantage as well. You're not having to spend a large outlay on time and money on establishing an entity if the purposes of you hiring in a country are just to test something out. Once you've crossed that bridge, then yeah, we can support on looking at helping you kind of obviously take your whole workforce over that way and into your entities when you're ready for that.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you both so much. We actually do have some Q&A questions that have come in. So first, I think this first one is for Harry. In regions with strict data privacy laws like the EU, how do we ensure our global hiring practices are compliant with GDPR and our other data protection regulations?
So if we are supporting you in hiring workers in those countries, we follow the strict GDPR rules. So when it comes to collecting sensitive information and sharing it with you, we will always ensure that we have the consent and permission of the individual that we're sharing that with. Likewise, that individual has the permission to deny us that and sharing that, and obviously removing their details off any databases that we have put them on.
Awesome. And just a reminder to everyone else that you can drop a Q&A question down in the Q&A section, and we'll ask away. This next one is for Sharon, though. It looks like there's some states that have pay transparency laws being rolled out in 2025. If employers in those states decide to post their pay ranges starting now, would they fall out of compliance with the Pay Transparency Act, and will they get fined for doing this?
Very good question. So there's no fine for posting job ranges for anyone. I mean, because it's something that the law says that so those employees in certain states need to do that because that's part of the requirement right now. But for anyone who wants to do it, even if they're not in the state that requires that or in the city that requires that, it's totally fine. No one's going to get punished for posting job compensation information. It's actually something that we as HR consultants are encouraging our employers to do that because it would actually help them find candidates that are on the same page with them in terms of what the compensation rates are. So there will be no penalties at all, whether or not you are in a state that is going to be enacting this requirement.
Awesome. Thank you. I think the next one is for Harry. What wellness and well-being programs are most effective in retaining global tech talent, particularly in high demand regions like India and Eastern Europe?
So we encourage anything that engages with the workers. So we have mental health advisors that individuals can kind of speak to that aren't connected to the business. So if they want to kind of obviously share thoughts and feelings and not feel like they are going to be kind of conveyed up to the business in a negative way. Also, we do and bring our global teams together through certain activities, which are kind of team bonding to encourage that integration and that feel of a single team. So we do things like step challenges. We do kind of what we call virtual cook-alongs. These are all designed to make everyone feel as part of a team that then in kind of camaraderie makes people feel better and obviously hopefully lead to better productive stuff.
Awesome. We actually had a question come in, and either one of you, if you feel like this is something you can jump on. We see global remote increase by 25% by 2030. What are the trends showing in the US percentage of remote work?
I don't have any data on that piece yet, so I will have to do some research and get back to you about that piece.
I can jump in. That a part of that World Forum research included the US in there. So the US by far has the most remote positions. It's primarily those same kind of professions that I'd mentioned. Tech and IT by far is the leader of global remote roles everywhere, but in particular the US as well. And it was actually sales and marketing was in second position for professions in the US.
Awesome. One last question. We're gonna ask Sharon, in the lieu of offering 100% remote work, we offer a hybrid work schedule where employees are required to work on site at least 3 days a week. If an employee refuses or cannot comply with this job requirement, can we fire them?
Yeah, so that's a question that's very there are many facets to that, all right? There's never a right answer. So it depends on the employee situation. If the employee's job does require them to be on site and there's no opportunity, no way that there's an accommodation for them to work off site because of the requirements of the job, then there could be a possibility that the job may not be a fit for the employee anymore. So you will, as an employer, have to have a very candid conversation with the employee to discuss what the job requirements are, and ultimately if the employee is able to fulfill that requirement to work at least 3 days a week in the workforce. If the employee is requesting it because of some sort of medical accommodation, for example, um, they have to go to doctor's appointments on certain days of the week, and they do need the time off, then that would be a whole different type of discussion in which now we're crossing into the disabilities possibly discussion and talking about interactive process. So I would say there's really no right or wrong answer to this. Definitely don't jump into the whole termination conversation immediately. The best way to really approach it is to get all the facts from the employees first. Ask them why they can not fulfill this requirement to work 3 days a week on site, and what challenges that they are possibly facing, that they can maybe perhaps come up with a solution or an accommodation if it's necessary.
Just had a question tied into that answer. Do you see an increase in ADA requests in the US for ERs that are looking to change their model? She gave the example of Amazon is going 100% 5 days per week.
We are seeing that. I've pretty much almost every day I'm getting a question about accommodations, and a lot of it has to do with reporting back to work post-pandemic. Many employers see that employees are finding ways to work from home and be more efficient, and they're finding reasons why they should continue working from home either 100% or a majority of the time. So instead of being in the office 3 or 4 days a week, be in the office maybe 1 day a week. So we do see a lot of accommodation requests coming through where employees are claiming that they have certain reasons and very good reason why they cannot report to work anymore, even though they could in the past before pandemic happened. And 9 times out of 10, there is usually a justifiable medical reason. And this, again, will go into the whole interactive process discussion, getting doctors certifications, having doctors review the job descriptions to see what the job entails and make recommendations on how best to accommodate the employee, whether it is to reduce the work hours, maybe let them continue working predominantly from home, change their position, job task if it's something that requires some physical work. So yeah, we are seeing many of these coming in the United States, and this is a hot topic that my team and I are constantly getting from our employers.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to put a little plug in. I just dropped a link into our chat. We did a webinar on the rise of accommodation requests earlier this year. So if you want to go check that out there, we talk a little bit more about that. But I'm going to wrap us up. And I cannot say thank you enough to Sharon and Harry for their time and their expertise on this topic. Both did fantastic, as always. But to learn more about MP's full service solutions for 2024 and more, you can visit our website at mphr.com. And if you would like to know more about Go Global, visit www.goglobal.com. I did drop both of those links into the chat, so be sure to check us out. And then join us for an upcoming webinar. Join MP for an upcoming webinar, From Hire to High Performer, Mastering Onboarding and Orientation. Visit our website to register and see the full calendar of upcoming events and available resources. We will be sending a recording of today's webinar with the presentation slides shortly. Thank you for joining us and have a terrific day.